My next guest is part of a really awesome film project. I'm a big fan of documentaries, especially sports documentaries. And so if I like that, how could I not be all over a documentary about the early days with Lute Olson surrounding the 1998 Arizona Wildcats Final Four team? Joining me on the program, 88 director Brad Malone. Hey, Brad, how are you?
Good. How you doing, Zach?
I'm doing really well. It's great to have you. And I got to say, somebody else told me that you are a former Camp Radio alum, too. I myself am the same.
Yes, I am. Yeah, I was Camp Radio, I think, 98 to 2000. Awesome. I graduated in 2000 at U of A.
Awesome. Keeping the roots here, and you and your brother are both from Tucson. How did the idea of making this film come about? How did you get here?
Basically, I've always loved movies, and I've always loved the Wildcats. So I went to a movie screening of a friend of mine. He did a documentary about the ostrich farm in between here and Phoenix.
Oh, I've driven by that so many times.
Yeah. I got to be honest. Like, when I went in thinking, well, okay, it's my friend, he's making a movie, I'll go to it. But I was really blown away by it, and I thought, if this guy can make a movie that is compelling, tells a great story, about the ostrich farm, I want to make a movie. And I thought, well, what do I know a lot about that I can make a movie about? And then Arizona Wildcats came first to mind, and then the 88 team, because that was the team that I fell in love with the Wildcats. And I think most of Tucson, that's my age, probably the same thing happened to them.
Because 88 seems like, especially with the story of Lute Olson, obviously Fred Snowden and his time before that, but for Lute Olson in this current era of Wildcats basketball, 1988 seems like a very logical starting spot.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It was, basically it was just like the perfect time. Everything happened perfectly. It was like when Steve Kerr injured his knee, he had to rehab his knee, and that made him miss his senior year. So his senior year actually started that 87-88 season. And that gave the rest of the team a year to kind of gel and get better as players. I mean, they had Sean Elliott, Anthony Cook, Tom Ford had just come on as a junior college transfer. They had the veteran, Craig McMillan. And then when Steve came back, as he says in the trailer, they were a juggernaut. And they had some great victories early in the season. They really projected them in the national consciousness. They beat Syracuse, Michigan. Syracuse the previous season had lost in the championship game to Indiana. They beat Michigan, who had a lot of NBA players. Bill Freer was the coach there. And then they beat Coach K, the Duke team, at McHale Center. And then they were ranked number one for the first time in school history.
And I've watched the trailer, and it gives me goosebumps. And the goosebumps start when Steve Kerr says, we were a juggernaut. And he says it with such conviction. He doesn't even blink. There was no hesitation.
Oh, yeah. He was very gracious. A couple summers ago, he gave us time to actually go visit him in San Diego, and he let us ask anything we wanted for 2 hours. We got to sit there and talk with Steve, and we were lucky that we did it at the time because he was just getting ready to go back to the NBA. Very gracious man, and I'm so happy that he won with the Warriors.
One of the things that I loved about the teaser is Lute Olson telling this story about why would I leave a program like Iowa to go to a place like Arizona? And when you think about that today, no disrespect to Iowa, it makes you laugh. It's amazing how things have changed.
Yeah, and definitely when Lute came to Tucson, he knew that basketball could be big here. In the 70s with Fred Snowden, he really kind of got things going, and then sadly it kind of tapered off a bit in the 80s. But he knew that people loved basketball in Arizona. He actually told me a funny story one time. He took Iowa to play Arizona State in Phoenix one year in the early 80s, and Iowa was a top 25 team, and so was Arizona State. They had more Iowa fans in Phoenix watching Arizona State than Arizona State did. And the reason that whole conversation came up is because I asked him when he came to Arizona, did he know the difference between Arizona and Arizona State?
Right.
He says, oh, yeah, I knew the difference. And he had gone to the Maui Invitational, tournament in Hawaii when he was at Iowa, and they played Arizona, actually. And he saw the fans that traveled to Hawaii during the Fred Snowden era. So he knew that people cared about basketball in Tucson.
The director of the film 88, Brad Malone, joins us on ESPN Tucson. You guys seem to have gotten everybody. I've only seen the trailer, obviously, but I mean, Steve Kerr, Sean Elliott, and then not only that, but you get guys outside of the program. Coach Olson is obviously there, but Talk about a guy like Jay Billis. How did some of these characters in the film, how did you get to them? How did they come about?
Well, with Jay, I actually reached out to him on his website. He has a website, and I just went on there, and I just casually said, hey, this is what I'm doing. Would you be interested in us, talking to you about it? Because I knew that he would be coming to Tucson with the program being elevated again. He'd be here for games throughout the season. And he said, yeah, definitely. That's something I'm interested in. So it took a while. He came back when ESPN came to game day. So Sean and I were able to set up an interview with him. He gave us about 20 minutes, and he gave us great answers. He really thinks a lot of Coach Olson and the program.
What's been the response overall from people when you reached out for this, especially the Wildcats? Have they been excited and welcoming to this whole process?
I think the first person we talked to was Bruce Frazier, who was actually an assistant on the Warriors staff this year. Mm-hmm. And he was the first official Gumby. If people don't know who the Gumbies were, they were kind of the bench players during the 88 season, and they were the fan favorites. They were waving towels. They were doing dances. They were really over the top. Like, if people saw them today and they saw what they were doing, they would be all over Deadspin. They'd be over, Yardbarker, all these websites that talk about just funny things in sports. But they weren't being pompous. They were just having a good time. But anyway, Bruce Frazier, he was the first person that we actually talked to outside of Lute Olson. Then we talked to Kevin O'Neill, because he was a big part of that 88 team. He was an assistant on Lute. He was a big recruiter for Lute in the early 90s. And he gave us some really great stories, too. So, yeah, people that we've talked to have been great, and we're hoping to talk to a lot more.
Anybody else that you haven't talked to that you want to? Can you tell me that kind of stuff?
Oh, yeah. There's, we definitely would love to talk to anybody on that team that will talk to us. We'd love to talk to Anthony Cook, Tom Tolbert, Kenny Lofton, Harvey Mason. The list goes on and on with the Cats. And we'd also, one goal we have is to talk to some juggernauts, pardon the word again, but people in the basketball world who are big time that were part of that season. For example, Coach K, when Arizona played Duke at McHale Center that year, Roy Williams was an assistant for North Carolina. I know Roy Williams has a lot of respect for Coach Olson. We'd love to talk to Dickie V, or Dookie V, as Coach Olson calls him. But that's the reason we're actually on Kickstarter right now. We're trying to raise funds to kind of finish filming the movie. If you go to our website, wildabout88.com, it talks about our movie, why we're doing this. There's a link to the Kickstarter. The sky's the limit. We want to talk to anybody who will talk to us, and we also want to talk to a lot of fans, too. We want to talk to the fans that were part of that season. Even though Arizona basketball today is amazing and it's so big, back then, I don't know if it was just because I was a kid, but they were just like rock stars in the town. People would go out to the airport and welcome them back in. When they came back after losing to Oklahoma, there was like 30,000 people that showed up at the football stadium just to welcome them home. Tucson just loves this team, and they still love this team to this day. We're getting some great response on our Facebook page. We have a Facebook page. If you go to Facebook and just search 88, we've got nearly 2,000 likes now. And that's been a big push, too, to help with our Kickstarter. And people just, they romanticize about this time, and for good reason.
This is when it all started, and you look at it in 88, I mentioned that's when it all started, and at the time, even Steve Kerr said, look, we're juggernauts, but there's no way he could have known what would have happened over the next 25 years and then some.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And another funny thing, too, about Steve, when he came to Arizona, he was just happy to get a Pac-12 scholarship. Right. He did not have aspirations of doing what they did while he was here. He told us that basically, I wanted to make one NCAA tournament, and I would have been satisfied. And then they ended up making the tournament 3 out of the 4 years he played, and they won 2 Pac-10 titles, and then, of course, that 35-3 team that we're still talking about.
You can find the Project 88 on their website, wildabout88.com. Please check them out at Kickstarter if you want to see this film kick in and support. He is Brad Malone, one of the directors of the film. Brad, good luck to you and your brother, and we'll love to have you on for an update.
Oh, I'd love to be on, Zach, and thank you so much for your support of this film, too. We really appreciate it, and thank you, Tucson.
Brad, anytime. Have a good one, brother.
You too.
Take care, man. I love passion projects. This is not what he does for a living. This is not his career. This is something that he wanted to do, and I love, because you asked the question, where did this all start? Well, I was watching this documentary about an ostrich farm. That's not how I thought he'd start the conversation, but I'm so glad he did. Now I got to tell you, though, I want to see this film. I mean, the basketball one, yes. But I want to see the ostrich one, too. I've driven past that place so many times I've never stopped. Now I'm wildly curious. Talk a little racing when we come back.
The same sports